The majority rules that our next guest is a great author. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on the newly released novel, The Majority Rules, and we're visiting with its author, Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan from the D.C. area. Good morning, Chief Judge Sullivan. Great to see you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be down here in South Carolina.
Thanks so much for flying down. The Palmetto State welcomes you.
Well, I'm having fun going around the country with my new book and being an author.
This is a big deal.
Well, I really am having fun with it. Sometimes I have to pinch myself and realize I'm an author now. I was on the bench for 16 years, and once I retired, I said I want to write something. I want to write a novel, and so I've written my first one and sold the second one already.
You're kidding. I did not know that. We'll have to get more into that. That's exciting. Share with the viewers a little about your background and how that led up to The Majority Rules, how it helped prep for the book, if it did.
Well, I think everybody has a novel in them, and I've had such a number of jobs that I decided that I would try to write a novel and put a realistic piece of fiction out there, something based on things that I've either seen, felt, smelt, or heard of. And so I came up with a novel of corruption in Washington, D.C., and it's a reality-based piece of fiction, and I'm having fun promoting it.
Absolutely. Now, did you originally grow up in the D.C. area?
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, Midwesterner, and left the Midwest to go to West Point. And after I graduated from West Point, I served in the Army for 5 years. And the best thing I got out of the Army was my Danish wife.
Is that right?
I met her when I was stationed in Europe. And but then I've had some interesting jobs in the Army. I was an Army Airborne Ranger. I was selected to be a Ranger instructor. And then, of course, at that time period, we were at war, and so I served my country over in Vietnam. I was first with the 4th Infantry Division, and then I was an aide on General Abrams' staff for the Science Advisor of Vietnam.
You know, when a viewer hears the word Army Ranger, or, I mean, when they hear phrases like, what are some of the special significance, let's say, of the Rangers?
Well, the Rangers are, I think, one of, if not the most elite soldiers in the world. If any of you viewers have seen Black Hawk Down, you'll see how the Rangers operate. It's a team effort. They're tough. They're determined. They won't give up, and they'll fight on. And I was very proud to have been. Wait a minute, I'm always an Army Ranger.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. And of course, I guess folks within the services, let's say in the Navy SEALs, they would think of themselves, and in each of the branches there must be a pretty elite group.
Yes. Well, some of the SEALs actually would come through the Ranger training, because the Ranger training not only is good light infantry training, the best, but it also teaches you small unit leadership. And the SEAL training is great. You know, they're good warriors, but they would send them to Ranger school to get that. Same with the Marines. Both services I admire. You know, I saw them in action in Vietnam. Worked with them, but I'm proud to be a Ranger.
Well, now, Judge Sullivan, growing up, did you always think you'd get into the military? I mean, did you know West Point was for you? Did you ever think of other schools? Was this something in the blood? I mean, had family members been in the Army? My
father was a policeman, and to me at that time, West Point was a big-name school, and also was a way that someone from a poor family could get a free education. I might add, that's the same reason Eisenhower gave for going to West Point. And I did get a wonderful education at West Point. And West Point really made me to a large part of what I am today, because West Point trains not only academically, but it physically trains you, and it trains your character through the honor code.
Speaking of the honor code, I think I saw at the gavelconsultinggroup.com website a little write-up about you that there had been within the honor code, hadn't you been involved in trying to help either update it or make sure that it stayed as strong as it has always been?
Greg, that's right. I was selected in '89 and it carried through to '90 to be on a federal commission to review the West Point Honor Code and update it and streamline it and make it more relevant to more modern. And I was proud that we came up with, I think, 23 recommendations. 21 of them were accepted by the cadets at West Point. They had a vote on it because it is their code.
It's so fascinating when you think about West Point. Everyone hears that, and obviously, we hear about congressmen or senators being instrumental in writing letters on behalf of their constituents and constituent family members who want to attend West Point. It's a really big, tough gig getting into West Point.
Well, Princeton Magazine or Princeton Review or someone ranked it as the toughest school to get into in the country last year.
Yeah, right.
And to get into, because you have to be not only mentally, academically qualified, but you have to go through a stringent physical and a physical aptitude test to get into. And they ranked it as the hardest school to get into.
Golly, that's incredible. You mentioned 16 years in the judiciary, and I think I saw back, was it in '84 that you were appointed by, was it President Reagan?
President Reagan, he appointed some wise judges. I don't know how he appointed me, but yes, President Reagan appointed me to the bench, and I being a judge has been one of the biggest things in my life. And I tried to capture that in the book, The Majority Rules, because I think people nowadays, with the focus on the federal judiciary, I think they're interested in exactly what are these federal judges, how do they behave, how do they make decisions, how are they selected, and all of that I captured in the form of a fictionalized thriller involving corruption in Washington. And I've been very pleased with the feedback I've gotten on it.
Absolutely. When folks, and as you say, the judiciary, the federal judiciary with the filibusters going on, and of course we'll talk a little bit tomorrow, a little more about some of the instances going on with the judiciary, obviously some of the murders recently or some of the shootings that have been impacted the entire country, and surely the thoughts about the judiciary dramatic. When you think about ascending to the bench for the first time in those early first couple of years for you, and then you fast forward to the last couple of years, think about some of those dramatic differences over that time period and how things changed in the federal judiciary.
Well, they have, and unfortunately some of the recent events, the shootings in Atlanta and Chicago, I think are indicators of a lack of respect the federal judiciary and all judges are getting. And there may be some reason for that, but I think a line has been crossed, and now some people think it's all right to criticize the judges. Now, judges aren't perfect. In this book, The Majority Rules, they're not. And even the hero, Tim Quinn, is a flawed person and has to struggle with doing the right thing. And, it's not automatic. In real life, that's how it is.
Those first words you say when someone asks you what you do to keep the book real. I mean, you are making an effort to constantly keep the book as realistic as possible, but at the same time, make it a thriller.
To me, it was a little bit easier because I lived many of the things in the book, and so that gave me the right mindset to frame a plot which has its thrills. It's got murder, it's got sex, it's got drugs, it's got corruption, it's got everything that you would expect to find.
Live with, yeah.
And I being on the bench for 16 years, there's a very few things you haven't seen, and so I've got a wide wide background in which to focus on it.
Absolutely. Without giving the plot away, giving anything away of the majority rules, can you share with us a little bit of the plot summary there?
Well, it's about the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit and a new federal judge. This is fiction now, but a new judge. A judge is murdered, and then a new judge takes his place, and that's the hero, Tim Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim Quinn, when he gets there, he finds out that there's something funny going on, not on every case, but on a few select cases. Some with political overtones and some involving what turns out to be the villain, Leo Draco, a powerful lawyer in town. And the book is about how Tim Quinn, the hero, now Judge Quinn, wrestles with his conscience and how he actually decides to take a plan to see if he can stop this conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's always so good on the jacket, on the cover. That inside jacket, you're able to get a little plot summary oftentimes of what it's about. And those are dramatic efforts to more or less summarize an entire book into those handful of words right on the inside jacket. That must have been kind of excruciating for you as you and the editors and otherwise were breaking that down. Was that tough to do?
Well, actually, it came a little naturally. I was very pleased that once I got the book written, I knew what I had done. I knew I had portrayed judges as ordinary people. I knew I had written a thriller with the viewpoint of a judge, something that is different for...
Right. Most folks wouldn't have any idea.
And then the third thing, I told you a bit about the Washington environment, how Washington works. It's a different world in Washington, as most of your viewers probably know, and this tells you my view of how Washington works.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. It is fascinating when you think about how Washington works. And, you know, most viewers may have traveled up, have visited the monument, have been on the Hill, have visited their senator or congressman's office, and maybe visited the Supreme Court, surely some of the other courts. What is it like, having lived much of your life now and having been, and we haven't, you know, we talked a little bit about your background. We didn't get into your legal defense during the Watergate of President Nixon, the activities there, which we surely want to talk about back in 1974, as well as your work with the United States Air Force and the NRO, which we can't wait to talk about.
Well, one of the things how Washington works that people will learn, I hope that people will learn from this book, learn a little bit about their government, is Washington is a place where favors reign supreme. Someone does a favor, there's a favor expected in return. The other thing is somewhat the flawed way we have a confirmation, of Senate confirmation of a presidential appointment. And I go through the confirmation process in the first part of the book. So you walk hand in hand, and you can see where there's some flaws in the system. Now, how we fix it, I'll leave that up to the readers, right, because you know, but I do expose that portion of the government and let them figure it out.
You stress, obviously, the majority rules is fiction, but there's a heck of a lot of truth throughout the book.
Well, it is what I call realistic fiction. It's fiction that is based upon a real-life scenario. As I read some of the modern novelists today, especially some of the thrillers, I sometimes go, wait a minute, that'll never happen. I mean, in one book, someone jumps on a plane, a private plane that goes 15 times the speed of sound, and I won't mention the author, but it's a big popular author, and boom, you know, I know that is unrealistic. I mean, even the military top planes, you know, we go only a fraction of 15 times the speed of sound. Another major author I saw had the head of a government agency as a major. A military officer, a major, running an agency of perhaps, you know, 10,000 employees. Well, that is not real life. So I wanted to make it so someone who's knowledgeable about Washington can read it and say, yeah, that works that way. And I've gotten feedback from that. I wanted to write an interesting story, a thriller, about Washington that someone outside of Washington would say, well, gee, that's how it works. And in order to do that, I had to make the thriller so someone actually walks in the steps of the hero and some of the people in the book. That was a trick that I learned through rewriting the book, and I did it because of a peculiar way I have of writing. I actually visualize as a movie this chapter I'm about to write. I'll think about that chapter for 2 or 3 days. I'll view it visually as a movie scene, and then I'll play it over. I'll get the dialogue, what the people would say, how it looks, how it smells, how it appears to people, and then I will write that chapter. And so some people have said the book is very visual, and that's because of the way I write.
So if someone asked you that question, if someone at a book signing says, well, Chief Judge Sullivan, how do you write? You would stress that visual aspect.
I think for me it works. That's the only way I can get the realism I want, and also have the dialogue ring true. For a lot of novelists, and later on I'd like to get into how one goes about writing a novel, or any book. But in order for make it to ring true, the dialogue has to sound right. And some of the novelists have a lot of trouble with that. They're good at painting the pictures or metaphors or clever saying or wisecracks, but they're having a tough time getting what normal people would say in the situation that the novel requires them to be in.
Right, which is instrumental, making sure that you're capable of getting it down to the common language so that everyone can understand.
My language in it is no one's going to have to run to the dictionary in my books, because I hate books that make you do that. And so if there's a simple word to describe a situation or an adjective, I will use that. And I made a conscious effort to do that because I tried to write a novel that I would love to read.
Right. You know, if viewers to talk to you about some of the themes of the book, I know obviously you talked about judges are ordinary. They're potentially even flawed. I mean, there are issues with judges. What are some of the other themes throughout the majority rules?
Well, I think one of the themes is the political nature of the judiciary. I think your viewers would be a little shocked to hear how political their judges are. Now, I use that theme as sort of an indirect theme in the book because you see that some of the judges are voting according to politics. And I'm not talking, I'm talking about they're being activist judges. They're bending the law to suit their own desires, prejudices, or preferences. And I think that's wrong. There's good judges, and the good judges are sometimes flawed. We have corrupt judges, and they're not corrupt all the time, just now and then. And then we have judges who are stupid and who don't understand the case, and lawyers out there will realize there are those.
Really, they can tell when
they can tell. And you ask a lawyer, say, what about this judge? And say, well, he is so stupid, I'm going to have to dumb down my argument to get to him. And then I write about judges who are lazy and incompetent and who are promoted there because they're political. They're only on the bench because they're political. 80% of the judges in America are elected. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means politics. It also, unfortunately, means campaign contribution.
No, you're talking about the entire judiciary nationally.
80% of all judges in America, state and federal, are elected in one way or another. Business Week did an analysis of this about 6 months ago, Business Week magazine, and they did a confidential survey of the elected judges. Remember, federal judges are all appointed by the president.
Right. So no federal judges are elected?
No.
Okay.
But we'll get back to them later. This survey showed it came back, and 46% of the judges, elected judges in America, that Business Week surveyed, they said that there was that campaign contributions influenced their action in court.
46% admitted that campaign contributions.
Now, if I was a elected judge on this anonymous survey, I would never have admitted that. So we can say 47%. You know it has to be higher.
Oh yeah, it has to be.
You know some of the judges didn't do it. So that's a little scary. And we have to find a way to get rid of this election of judges, I think.
You mean across the board, Chief Judge Sullivan?
Yeah, I think so. Even the federal judges, their political favors being given here and there, and that's why they're nominated to be federal judges. What we need to do to get better judges, state and federal, I think, have nonpartisan commissions like they do in Ireland, for instance. Ireland, if there's a vacancy, or England, there'll be a commission, a final commission. 1/3 will be members of the public. A third of the commission will be retired judges who have no axe to grind and who will want to judge people on merit. And then 1/3 will be lawyers who practice before judges. Believe me, lawyers want a good judge on the bench.
I bet.
Because if they have a good case, they don't want it being decided on political grounds or losing it on the fact that the judge is incompetent or stupid or lazy. So these lawyers want good judges, and I think they could interview people, look at their records, look at their judicial temperament, and select 2 or 3 judges and give it either to the governor or if it was in a state that appoints judges by governors, or they could give it to the president. I think it should be even for presidential appointments.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It's going to be very difficult because almost all the presidents since Washington, President Washington, he have used politics more a way to give out favors on some political appointments.
You know, one of our guests earlier this week, who you know, your predecessor on the bench, former Chief Judge Robinson Everett, was talking about independent commissions being put together by the state legislatures of ordinary citizens and others, special judges to help oversee the drawing of congressional districts. Because, of course, you have the state legislatures now drawing congressional districts in almost every state, and there can obviously be quite a bit. If the legislature is controlled by Democrats or by Republicans, one or the other, they could obviously draw those congressional districts to more or less suit their desires.
Well, I agree with Chief Judge Everett on that point, because anything we can do to take the politics out of it. A judge is supposed to be unbiased. A judge is supposed to be pure in that their judgment shouldn't be influenced by favors or friends. They should do their duty without regard to that. And we're finding, though, and this is perhaps explaining some of the disrespect to judges, that some judges are voting because of political necessities or trying to look good, you know, for promotion or whatever. So I agree with Chief Judge Everett on that point. I think it should be extended to the appointment of judges themselves.
You know, we've just got a couple of minutes, Chief Judge Sullivan. It's so important to think about. Obviously, we can go into a little bit of this tomorrow, but let's pretend we're on hardball. And obviously, I know Chris Matthews spent a lot of time with you recently going through that. But wouldn't a practical question from him be, how about you, appointed in '84, right in the middle of a 2-term of President Reagan? Weren't there any thoughts that there were any desire to more or less do things that potentially were appropriate up the Reagan chain? Or no, were you very pure on the bench?
See, I was a prior appointment of President Reagan. I was serving, at the time I was appointed to the bench, I was serving as the General Counsel of the Air Force.
Wow.
The 1,700 lawyers in the Air Force, I was had oversight over. So in '86, when he appointed me to the bench, I was sort of an anomaly. I didn't have a strong political base. I was coming out of government, very infrequent appointment to come out of government, but But the president and the people who were guiding him, to my luck, looked at my record and said that they thought I would make a good judge.
Right.
And I hope I've served the president by being so.
And the country well, absolutely. Do you mind coming back tomorrow to share with us a little more about the majority rules, putting it together, everything that went into it, and obviously the publishing and editing and all this, many of the steps leading up to it?
Well, I'm enjoying myself down here in South Carolina and in Myrtle Beach, and it's a great community, and it's a pleasure for being on your show, and I'll be here tomorrow morning.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan coming up next. If your main character is a firefighter, you've got to research fires, how they burn, the training and techniques of firefighters. In the majority rules, Chief Judge Sullivan didn't have to do that research. He knew what judges were about. He'd lived it. There were activities throughout the book that you'll see from the experience of someone who's lived that life. Take the time to visit EugeneSullivan.com or visit virtually any bookstore around the country. You'll be able to find a copy. The Majority Rules. Catch Part 2 of Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan tomorrow.